Ich habe was gehört.
You were doing like internet.
Oh, really?
No. What? Ich stehe es bestimmt so. Maybe you take a job or something.
You can start when you start. I can check when you come.
Okay. Is this your first lecture? Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate 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 Vasudevaya.
Okay, we're reading from. Soll ich jetzt das Mikro?
Ja, es funktioniert nicht. Ich weiß nicht.
Okay. We're reading from 5th canto, the activities, 5th canto, 6th chapter, activities of Lord Rishabhadeva, text 11. I'll just read that. It's not a meter that is for call and respond. I just read it once. Techa yarvaktanaya nicha loka yatra yandha parampara yashvatas vastas tamasyande swayam eva prapadishyanti. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Srila Prabhupada. Ki Jai. Okay, translation is: low-class people, due to their gross ignorance, introduce a system of religion that deviates from the Vedic principles. Following their own mental concoctions, they automatically fall down into the darkest regions of existence. Purport's very brief, it's just mentioning, it says, in this connection one may see Bhagavad Gita chapter 16, where there's a description of the downfall of the Asuras, 1616 and 1623. Umagyanatimrandasya gyananjana shalakaya chakshurunmuktam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Garamayam Danati Swapadantikam Vanchatrapatarupyascha Kripasajubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Okay, I'll read it one more time. Low-class people, due to gross ignorance, introduce a system of religion that deviates from the Vedic principles. Following their own mental concoctions, they automatically fall down into the darkest regions of existence. So before going into all the low-class topics, I wanted to read something that Kastuba from Wisdom of the Sages recently said on Wisdom of the Sages. Do you want to give it a try? The girls tried it before. I don't know what. Recently said something on Wisdom of the Sages, and to me it sounded almost a little romantic in a very spiritual way, because he was praising Srimad Bhagavatam. And he was saying, in the Srimad Bhagavatam, again and again and again, we hear the prayers of great souls, great powerful yogis that have reached the full evolution of their depth of their yogic understanding. We see that in the Srimad Bhagavatam's narrator, Shukadev Goswami, who is recognized by everyone, by all the sages, as someone who was completely otherworldly. They even ask, why is it that someone so otherworldly and transcendent, why is it that he gets interested in hearing all these stories of Krishna, who is the God of love? Isn't that for less intelligent, for less renounced, for less detached, for less aware people? aren't those just stories to entertain and lead people into a certain direction? It can't certainly be the pinnacle of spiritual awareness. But no, Shukadeva Goswami says it is the pinnacle of spiritual awareness. That when you get to that fully evolved message of Vedanta, it's a personal thing, and you can relate to that person. And then prayer becomes natural because you speak to that person. You're not just begging for things, you're saying, I need to speak to you. I'm tired of turning my back on you. I'm coming back and I want to talk. So, of course, the Srimad Bhagavatam is that full of prayers. But we also have what the verse says, the low-class people, and we have all those demons. And so we know that for Leelas and for interaction with Krishna, Krishna needs a counterpart. And I'm not speaking of Radharani as his counterpart. I'm speaking of, basically, he needs some demons he can defeat, some demons he can slay. And if you look at this, just at this point, from that point that you have a story, when you read a book, when you go to the movies, you have a storyline. So you have a beginning, a middle, and the end. And if you look at this, then you can take the demons as a counterpart, so Krishna can slay them. But also those stories about the demons and the low-class people. Does it work now? Oh, wonderful. They're also here to make a point. To make a point that because we need to see what's wrong. We need to see what we are not supposed to do. And it is also a warning that we can see how close we are actually to also maybe sometimes falling in that category of the low-class people. Those two verses mentioned in the purport from chapter 16, the title of chapter 16 is The Divine and Demonic Natures. And I'm going to read those really quick. The verse 16:16, it says, thus perplexed by various anxieties and bound by a network of illusions, they become too strongly attached to sense enjoyment and fall down into hell. And in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he mentions that this kind of demoniac man, they don't know any limit. They are enamored by their possessions, by the ones they have, and they want to acquire more.
Yes.
They believe in their own strength and not in the law of karma. And they don't see any bigger arrangement behind everything. So such a person, he does not believe in performing yagas or sacrifices. That's the gist of that purport. And then he also mentions verse 16:23. It says, he who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection nor happiness nor the supreme destination. And in the purport he says that such a man, even though he may think, but he will never become perfect in this life. And then Srila Prabhupada, he says something interesting where I even thought oh my gosh, that's me sometimes. Because he said, a man may theoretically know all these things, but if he does not apply them in his own life, then he's to be known as the lowest of mankind. Maybe I'll say this again. A man may theoretically know all these things, but if he does not apply them in his own life, then he is to be known as the lowest of mankind. So maybe you've experienced something already in your life where you think oh, have I done this? So yeah, human life is especially meant for purifying one's existence, and Srila Prabhupada stresses that. So even though we as practicing devotees or aspiring devotees, as practicing bhaktas, we don't necessarily intentionally try to introduce a system of religion that deviates from the Vedic principles. it had happened before, and there are many of such examples of such low-class people in scriptures like Srimad Bhagavatam and Mahabharata, and those are bona fide scriptures that we can refer to. So I thought I'm gonna present you a few of those examples of those low-class people and what happened to them. So we have in the 4th canto, we have King Vena, and as it says, he's a king. He was born from a king's line, so he was actually a ruler, but he abandoned Vedic principles and he imposed his own concocted system of religion. So after becoming a king, he stopped the Vedic sacrifices and he declared himself as the object of worship, and so he rejected the worship of Vishnu. And then what also happened, and we know from Bhagavad Gita 3:10-21, that's the verse where it says, whatever great men do, common people will follow. The same happened in the reign of King Vena, that his irreligious behavior led to chaos in society because people, they followed his misguided system. And if you don't really grow up with parents then who teach you this Vedic principle, then maybe not all of us, it happened to all of us, didn't happen to me. So we need people, we need teachers, and by the mercy of Krishna and gurus, we meet people. By undeserved mercy, we meet people like that, and they teach us, and then we can follow role models, so to say. But if society is, if the leaders in society are not teaching us those Vedic principles, then we may follow whatever leaders are, whatever role models they are, whatever they teach us. And we see in our society today that sadly our leaders, they don't follow the Vedic system, they don't follow their dharma according to that system, and they're basically really bad role models where it's all about power and money. And it is also, sadly, also sometimes we follow not only great men in a hierarchy of like, this is a leader, this is a teacher, this is, I don't know, a governor, a chancellor, or something. We also follow people who are famous, and then it can be that if those people, they don't have a path which they follow, which is one step at a time according to that system, what we learn here on this bhakti path, then we might be thrown a little bit back and forth, because people basically do really odd things. Another example for such a low-class person, in a way, is King Puranjana. He is also in the 4th chapter, and even though it's an allegory, we are the same kind of like souls living in the city of 9 gates. So he also deviated from the Vedic path because he was way too attached to materialistic and irreligious practices. And the same way, like King Puranjani, we also maybe become entangled in like material desires, and in this way neglecting spiritual principles. And then another example I found in the Mahabharata. And in the Mahabharata there's the story of Jarasandha. He was the ruler of Magda, and brought my big book to read just a short part. And then, so at this time, King Yudhishthira, he was going to do this Rajasuya sacrifice, and he was talking to Krishna, and he asked him like if he has any enemies, and Krishna said, well, basically no, apart from Jarasandha. And so they went to him to basically fight him. And so Krishna says to him that you should understand that we have come here out of enmity towards you. And then Jarasandha, he replies, he's surprised at such words. Jarasandha responded, how can this be? I have never acted inimically toward any Brahmana. Indeed, after carefully scrutinizing my memory, I cannot recall a single instance where I displeased the Brahmana in any respect. And Lord Krishna's answer is, he says, Jarasandha, how can you consider yourself to be innocent when you are holding other kings captive with the intention of offering them in a human sacrifice to Lord Shiva? Who else but you would perform such an abominable act? Human sacrifices are never seen except amongst the most degraded persons. And what's interesting is that very often in stories we hear from or about demons, rakshasas, low-class people, that they know a certain way of etiquette and they follow a certain way of etiquette. You know, like Hiranyakashipu, he worshipped Brahma, but to get boons, to get something out of it. And then other people, they worship Lord Shiva, or they know that they worship Brahmanas. There's a certain etiquette. Bali Maharaj, he worshipped the Lord in his appearance as Vamanadev because he was a Brahmana. But it's kind of one-sided, and it's very ignorant if you do it just because you know you're supposed to do it and not out of respect. So imagine if a visitor comes to the temple and somebody introduces him to the temple president, and then this visitor thinks like, oh, he's a person of authority, I'm going to be very respectful, I'm going to be nice and friendly. But if that person then acts very disrespectful towards other persons, then, I mean, would you say that's a nice behavior? That's not the way you would maybe want to be treated if you're on either side, actually. And Krishna is our topmost role model, basically. He says that he is equal to everyone and he favors no one. And this, so Jarasandha, he was also very ignorant towards the kings, but he claimed to have been very, very respectful always to the Brahmanas. And then there's another story, and I have to admit, I don't know where it comes from, but I know that Raghunath from Wisdom of the Sages mentioned it. I heard this story at least 3 times, and it's the story of the veterinarian and his assistant. Anybody knows this story? Okay. I'll read it, it's not very long. So it says, once the veterinarian was called to a farm where he discovered a valuable horse whose neck was greatly swollen. The veterinarian opened the mouth of the horse, examined inside, and then asked the apprentice to hand him a bag. Taking from the bag a wooden mallet, the veterinarian proceeded to smash at the horse's neck. Very soon after this unusual action, the horse's swelling subsided, and the farmer thankfully praised and paid the veterinarian for his work. Almost immediately after the incident, the apprentice deserted the doctor and decided to become a veterinarian himself. Word soon got around that the apprentice was posing as a genuine veterinarian, but was causing havoc wherever he went. The report was that the so-called veterinarian was in fact killing animals whenever they came in there with various growth, cysts, or swellings, and rather than administering the necessary treatment. So whenever he saw a horse with any kind of ailment, he just broke out that hammer and started pounding according to the big cyst in the neck. Finally, the master veterinarian caught up with this rascal and strongly rebuked him. What do you think you're doing? I hear you imitating my practice, but as a result you are killing poor animals wherever you go. The cheating apprentice replied, but I'm only doing what I saw you do, O master. He explained that he was only doing what he had seen his master do in that last visit. I couldn't quite understand. I did everything that you did. Whenever I went to see an ailing animal, I would smash it with the mallet. But unfortunately, the results were not as good as yours. You fool, said the real veterinarian. You fool. What you saw was a very special case. The horse had swallowed a watermelon, so that's why I had to break it from the outside. It was particular to this particular case, and not a general practice for all cases. The horse had a big watermelon stuck in its throat. So actually in India the watermelons are smaller than ours, and we even know different sizes, but still for a horse neck, even a small watermelon could be too big. Sorry?
Could you please put the mic a bit down because I can see.
Okay. Better? Yes. Okay. Yeah, so even though this is not an example for introducing an irreligious system, it's a good example for somebody who is going on his own whims. You know, like the verse says, following their own mental concoction. Because this veterinarian, he was handling without any true knowledge as a basis, and he was just basically just making stuff up, and there was no true understanding. And it doesn't have any value, and it's it's dangerous, and it's very ignorant to do anything without a basic knowledge, and it's also not sustainable. And in a way, we also see that there is something valuable in tradition, but we also need to learn to apply it, and we need to learn to how to be innovative so that it works rather positively than negatively. And all those stories, I mean, there are many more stories. All those stories, in a way, they all have similar points where material desires play a role, where people are leading their own concoctions. They speculate and they disregard Vedic authority, Vedic principles, and they interpret just on their own ideas. And then if leaders do that, then the whole leadership and the whole society and the following, it becomes completely irreligious. And if they promote their own false system of religion, basically for personal gain, like I mentioned before, like power, money, fame. Yeah, and they neglect their dharma because they forget their duties because of sense gratification, or the attachment of sense gratification. And even though people are still people, and we also heard that even spiritual leaders fall, there is a system, and I don't know if you may know what I'm hinting at, what we can do and surround us with to stay protected. Any idea? I know I'm saying this because I know what I'm hinting at.
The devotees. We really have to associate with the devotees.
Association is a very good point. I was hinting something else, and maybe if you hear the first three words of the verse, you will know. So, in this beautiful book, Sri Prema Bhakti Chandrika from Narottam Das Thakur, there is the chapter 1 is called Shri Guru Mahima, the glories of the spiritual master. And the first 4 verses, I think you sang today, is what we call as Guru Vandana. starting with Shri Guru Charana Padma. But this song, or so to say, has 6 more verses. And the 10th verse is, it's kind of like, sorry. The first 4 verses is glorification of the spiritual master, and then the glories of the Vaishnavas, and the glories of Sri Rupa and Sanatana Goswami, but they all belong together. And the 10th verse, I'm trying to use a meter Devi Radhika showed me. Probably not as nice as she can sing. It goes like this. Sadhu Shastra Guru Bhakya Hridaya Kariya Aikya Satatapa Siva Prema Maje Karmi Gyani Bhakti Hina Iha Ke Kariba Bina Naratama E Tattva Gaje. The translation is, my desire is to have my heart purified by the statements of the Vaishnavas, scriptures, and spiritual master. And and seeing the unity of these 3, I will always float in the ocean of love of God. I will be aloof from the bad association of the fruitive workers, mental speculators, and the people devoid of devotional service. I, Narayani Das, sing this truth. So if you paid attention, the first 3 words were Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru, and this is a system. We need to really like set in place and surround us with this. It's almost like Raghunath calls this guardrails, and like if you have a car, and sometimes my car only has it in the back, but if I park in the back and then I hear the beepers, when I come too close, it starts with like beep, beep, beep. When I come close, it goes beep, 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 beep. And when I come really close, it goes beep. It's just one sound. But those are my guardrails, and I know how far I can go. But I also already know where it starts. And Sadhu, Shastra, Guru, those are the things we can surround ourselves with, where we can always check. We can always check, what do the saintly persons say, what does the Shastra say, what does my Guru say, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a Diksha Guru who initiates one. We can have many Shiksha Gurus where we can always check. And so the story of King Vena and the story of King Paranjana, they're both in the 4th canto, and somewhere in between, in a purport, it actually says, in 416.1, it says, as stated by Narayani Das Thakur, Sadhu Shastra Guru, one has to test all spiritual matters according to the instructions of saintly persons, scriptures, and the spiritual master. The spiritual master is one who follows the instructions of his predecessors, namely the sadhus or saintly persons. A bona fide spiritual master does not mention anything not mentioned in the authorized scriptures. Ordinary people have to follow the instructions of Sadhu, Shastra, and Guru. Those statements in the Shastras and those made by the bona fide Sadhu or Guru cannot differ from one another. And Srila Prabhupada, he has actually also given class on this particular verse, and he also mentions, he says, the only hope is if you go through the Shastras, Vedic literature. That is the way to understand. We have to elevate the human civilization from a platform which is on equal level with Hawk's civilization. And he also mentions, our aim of life is not get a comfortable life for a few years. Actually, there is no comfortable life. So those are. And then the verse also, the verse also mentions association. So those are things we need to surround ourselves with as our guardrails, Sadhu Shastra Guru, the association. And association, it's not just like that we need to have good association. We need to have association because King Bharat Maharaj, he had no association. It's how he fell in love with a deer, right? So if we have that, and if we have that constantly, because I think 2 lectures ago, Krishna Premarupa, he mentioned the verse from somewhere in the first canto, where it says that people in age of Kali have bad memory. I'm a good example for that because I cannot remember the whole thing, and they're always disturbed, and so our mind tends to wander. So if we have our guardrails and we position that around ourselves, be it living in the temple but also living outside, if we keep this close and the good association close, then this is a good protection from where we can go further. And so that 16th chapter, where I read earlier that the divine and demoniac natures, it says, like those examples for the demoniac people, but the first verse, actually the first 3, 1 to 3, it actually says, it describes the nature of divine personalities, and it says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, fearlessness, purification of one's existence, cultivation of spiritual knowledge, charity, self-control, performance of sacrifice, study of the Vedas, austerity, simplicity, non-violence, truthfulness, freedom from anger, renunciation, tranquility, aversion to fault-finding, compassion for all living entities, freedom from covetousness, gentleness, modesty, steady determination, vigor, forgiveness, fortitude, cleanliness, and freedom from envy and from the passion for honor. These transcendental qualities, O son of Bharata, belong to godly men endowed with divine nature.
Which verses? Which verses? Which verse is it?
16, 1 to 3. So, 16, 1 to 3, the 16th chapter describes the divine and demoniac natures. So in that first verse, we can check, like, if I want to be on the good side and not on the demoniac side, then I can check in this verse, like, where am I and where do I have to work on? And as I said earlier, I can only speak for myself. There's a lot I have to work on. And there are things, and that's also important, there are things that I can practice on my own. I can study the Vedas on my own. I can practice, so to say, cleanliness on my own. But there are many things where I can also practice how I behave toward others, like the aversion to fault finding and forgiveness. There are things where I can check my behavior, because like what I said before, the example of Jarasandha, where he thought he was so good because he was so respectful toward the Brahmanas, but then he wanted to give those kings in a sacrifice. There are many things I can practice toward others, and it may sound simple, but kindness, compassion, also apologizing, maybe listening when you talk to someone else, listening and practice this listening before you want to respond right away, or this trying to be right there is this meme where it says, you know, when you have the chance to be either right or kind, be kind, choose kindness. Those are all practices we can do every day to everybody we meet on the streets, at work, in school, in the temple. We can practice those personality. We can try to be a better person by being this person and by looking at this chapter, because otherwise it says the low class people, they automatically fall down into the darkest regions of existence. So trying to avoid that, there's many things we can do. And sadly, I'm already done with all my preparations. I'm not sure if you have maybe some questions or comments. Please,
Yeah, thank you.
give a minute.
Thank you so much for your.
But my hearing's really bad. Do you have a microphone?
Thank you so much for your lecture. I really appreciate that how you point out how we should be careful not to concoct our own things, and that we actually doing it in a sense, and yeah, it's just these godly qualities we should really practice it deeply, right? And yeah, you were mentioning how to be more kind than more right. But in practice it's sometimes more difficult to practice. So how would you go through these godly qualities in practice, like practically, that we're really aware of? And
Sorry, can you
like if you want to practice, like, okay, let's focus on fearlessness or something like that, or how to really apply it in one's day-to-day life. Because if we're going out of the lecture and we don't take ourselves like, okay, I'm doing this and this for improvement, and usually we don't, then maybe you have some practical advices what we can do.
Well, I recognize that if it's, if something is new to you, you kind of like maybe have to hear it a few more times to like set it in, and then you can, so to say, really read it, meditate on like, okay, this is theoretically, this is a good behavior, I should be like this. And I recognized for myself that sometimes in a situation where you want to be good, but then it happens that action and reaction, that you react in a certain way, that maybe later after that, when you reflect on a conversation or so, that you recognize, oh, maybe I should next time behave a little different, maybe I should not try to think about my answer, but I should try to listen. So this recognizing that I need to change, this is kind of like the first step, because if you don't have the awareness of wanting to change something, wanting to be a better person, if you don't have the awareness, then you just go and live your life and do whatever comes up in your mind, and then you react. But if you recognize it, then it may even take a while. And I recognize it for myself that I've had teachings where in a way people as role models, as good examples, showed me how and taught me like, this is the way. And then I had conversations where I also was like, oh wait, I should maybe like react in a different way. And it takes a while, but then I recognize that these days, when I look back, that I know now I react different than I would have reacted maybe 10 years ago. This also because I'm old. I have already had many conversations where I didn't react the way I wanted. But now it is much easier. But it is also, like you mentioned before, this good association. If you keep this good association, then you always see those role models. And I know that with my friends and with when I travel and I meet other bhakti practitioners, that the way we are with each other, that is so different than sometimes at work, or just looking back 20 years ago when I was not knowing, when I didn't know about this path. So it takes a while, but the good association as a role model, and then also maybe every now and then reflecting on your own behavior and what do you do. And you know what? It is even a step. You can step it up if you really go to a person and apologize. If you have the feeling that you've done something wrong, like in a conversation, and if you want to do that, if you feel like I need to just do this because the way our conversation went, I didn't like it. I didn't like the way I react. I even maybe did not like the way that person reacted, but just to reflect on my own behavior, then you can do this for yourself, but also without expectation of any reaction. Like if somebody says I forgive you, then that's nice. But if you go into a conversation and say, I'm not expecting anything from the other person, I want to do this for myself and to have my peace of mind, and because I know I maybe didn't behave in a way I wish I would have. But no expectations. Raghunath often says when he has those 6 pillars of bhakti, and as I mentioned, people in Kali Yuga have bad memory. I'm not sure if I get this all together, but he often says, trade your expectations with appreciations. And so if you go to a person and you expect something, then this could lead to your mind going just like nuts. But if you maybe go to a person, and it even is like a step up, if you go to a person who you maybe not call a close friend, maybe somebody you don't like so much, if you appreciate the person, and if you see, that's one of the points, see the good in others and let them know it. If it's very easy to say something good to a very dear friend, to a person you love, but if you appreciate a person and look for a good trait in a person that you don't like, then it's not just good for yourself, it can even elevate that person. A person can even think of him or herself like, I'm not really a good person, I don't know what's wrong with me. But if somebody sees something good in that person, if you think of yourself like you're not a good person, but then somebody comes to you and tells you like, I really appreciate this and that in you, then that person, you can even uplift that person. I'm sorry, I went a little astray from your question, but I hope that helps.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. Anyone else? You don't have to. Anything? Oh, come on.
I could have a second point was that you were mentioning how everyone is following leaders and role models, and of course every single person.
Microphone.
Oh, microphone.
And you were mentioning
Everybody's following
that,
leaders.
everyone is following leaders, and that we accept role models, right? And that we accept role models in that
Yeah.
sense, and actually every single person of us is a leader in some way,
Yeah.
small or big, and yeah, to be aware of that is always inspiring me also to do it right, like in this sense, or to try it at least. Of course, I've been doing so many things wrong all the time, but yeah, if you're really aware actually that your actions are counting, then it's more powerful. Yeah. Just want to mention this point, and thank you for.
That's a really good point, and it also reminds me of, I have to admit, I've been with Raghunath to a lot of trips, and I listen to Wisdom of the Sages a lot. But that reminds me of something that what Raghunath speaks of, because he very often has people who are very new to bhakti, and then he explains that when he explains what the four principles we follow, for example, drinking alcohol, he says that if you you can handle it, but someone else cannot, then if someone else sees you maybe just drinking a half glass of wine or so, that someone else may think like, oh, she can handle it, I can do that too, but the person cannot handle it. And so he says, you have no idea who's looking up to you as a role model, who is, and then, like you said, we are all leaders. You want to behave in a way that people, not that they look up to you, but that they don't go astray from their path. And if you set a good example, if you, so to say, walk the talk, then other people might be very inspired. So that's a really good point, to be a role model, not just for yourself and to like check all the boxes, but you may not know who looks up to you and who thinks, oh, she's awesome. I want to be like Yamuna. Okay, it's 8:30 on the dot. Thank you so much for listening. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Narayani ki jai.
Thank you so much.